a lot has been said in the Congress about privacy and security and how it's important to keep this balance between privacy and usability. And I think in the Internet of Things, that's very important because in order for it to work well, you have to have some way to aggregate the data, maybe in an anonymous form, but still make sure that you can use it. Just as an example, when we started Geonecta, we started as a very generic platform for hooking sensors to the web. And one of the first projects we did was with a group of Harvard researchers that wanted to monitor microclimates in dormitories. So they had this box that it could measure humidity, light, noise, air quality. And what they wanted to do is correlate those measurements with the performance of students in exams. So it's a very interesting question, very useful research data. But then if you think about if you know about the measurements from a specific dormitory, then you can also, that's a lot of things you can tell about what's going on in that room just from those measurements. So there's a big privacy issue there that has to be handled in a way so that you can still do these experiments and you can learn from the data, but still respecting the privacy of the users.
Now, going to Steve's points quickly, he mentioned going into the business and where the money is to make really these technologies happen. And we made a research that shows that the opportunity in 10 years, it's $19 trillion. And it's not what companies like us will sell, but it's the consumer of those technologies, what's the value that they will add. And that brings a huge opportunity for this audience to either, if they are on public sector or on the private sector, to jump and bring better business basically on 5 things. The main one is monitoring your assets. So you have the privacy issue, right? But when you're able to lighten up something on the network, and then you can manipulate this information, then you can make better use of your assets as a business. And then the other big one is innovation. You can move much more faster on innovation. And if you're not going to do that, somebody else will.
Yeah.
So now it's a matter of who moves the best and the fastest to make some value on also employee productivity. So yes, there's a balance between what you give and you get. No, what's the value of what you're getting? So if sharing some information also on the employees can help you on the productivity, and you can bring back that value to the employee, and countries like Mexico to increase our productivity not on hours labored, but on effectiveness of those hours, I think it's worth it.
You both touch a very important point because, in a certain sense, you're right. For a lot of commercial applications and industry application, it's a lower entry point from a social acceptance point of view of the technology. But ultimately, some industries are more advanced or more mature or even more open to the concept of the IoT than others. What kind of industries are you looking, if you want to, as a speechheads, right? That you see this dynamic either happening, okay, or an increasing interest in adopting IoT for their own processes.
Yeah, when you look at, again, there's always a lot of media around the consumer, because again, we're all consumers. Yeah. It gives them a broader audience, right? And what I find just really, what I love about this business is that you see a couple of things, right? You see industries that again, maybe they haven't changed in decades, right? And all of a sudden, they're able to add connectivity and intelligence and reinvent themselves. They're able to. One of my favorite customers that we have is a customer that they're in the draft beer business, right? Well, I didn't know that the draft beer business, and I'm not talking about bottles and cans, I'm talking about draft like bars, restaurants, those kind of things. In the US, the draft beer business is bigger than the cell phone business. Now that in itself maybe is a societal issue, I'm not sure. But, so there's huge dollars in this, and so they've taken, and so there's a whole infrastructure and ecosystem. It's a perishable product. They deliver it. Again, I live in Austin. We're a big event town. We have the Formula One, and then we have the biker rally and the school teacher. I mean, one weekend after another, there's always an event. And so, you know, there's these big bars, and they're able to then track consumption, know when things are empty, get that data goes back to the distributor. So all of a sudden, you know, they didn't reinvent an entire ecosystem, but they invented a beer keg scale. That's it. That's really what it does. It's a connected scale. You know, now I have some colleagues that have these connected scales in their bathroom, and they got rid of them because their wives were monitoring the weight that they were managing, and that wasn't a good thing. But you know, so you see these opportunities, and so what I find really, what is really great about this industry is people are looking at businesses and they feel like these IoT opportunities are right in front of them. They know that if I add some intelligence, you know, again, restaurants, commercial buildings, hotels, all these productivity and improvements are right in front of them. And if they make those investments, they know they're going to get an advantage. So, you know, I've had customers or product people come up to me after me in these kind of events and talk about the most obscure things that they're looking at. And it can be areas in agriculture. I had a gentleman come up to me last week. He was looking at honeybees. Now, I don't know anything about that, right? I know it's critical to our food supply, but yet, you know, here's a guy that's looking some way to add, I don't know what, in tracking the bees, doing something, you know, with honeybees. And I think, I don't know if it's a big business, but it's something that's right in front of them and something that's critical. So, you know, it's people are looking for things that they have experience in them that are right there, and it's all these businesses. So.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with that. Like, what we're doing in Geonecta actually is we have identified one of those other needs. In particular, we're looking at propane gas tanks, and right now propane distributors in Mexico and parts in the US, they don't know the exact level of their tanks that they're serving. So they sometimes have to call the customer, figure out what's the right amount of gas, how much gas they have, and if they need to get refilled soon. And sometimes they just make wasting trips that are wasted, right? They have to go there, the tank was not full, was not empty, so they wasted part of the trip. Or sometimes they do emergency deliveries. They didn't expect that the tank was going to empty so quickly. And that's one of the applications that's like shouting for Internet of Things technology, right? Like just putting a sensor there and having some smart logic that tells you, well, this tank is halfway empty, but this day of the week,
or just once a day.
Right.
It's another thing, right?
Just once a day is enough. And I think that just like this vertical that we're targeting, there are many other businesses that are calling for IoT technology to make them more efficient.
Yeah. Well, there are some industries that are more tech savvy or early adopters than others. Of course, the high-tech companies are the first ones, but we have other industries like banking, the finance services market, the retail market, education, healthcare. Those are the early adopters, and we are starting to see a lot of action there. Just last year, we held the Internet of Things Forum in Barcelona last year, and there were like 50 companies getting a consortium to start this economy working, right? We're having the second one in Chicago in a month from now, or pretty soon, and I mean I'm amazed about the velocity this is going. So we have a lot of these industries working already there, but the pace is so fast that we are making startup weekends events to help entrepreneurs see where there's the opportunity for them, and it will just go faster and faster. And I will invite, just to have our audience can imagine the possibilities, to go to YouTube, to the Cisco channel, and look for the Internet of Everything videos. And there you will have ideas how this can impact to the supply chain, going to a concert, being on an ambulance, and parking, and that kind of things. It's really inspiring things to see, and then you can see that it really applies everywhere.
Good.
Me? My turn?
Yeah.
Okay. When you can save companies money, improving their efficiency, serving a need, I think that's where the business really makes sense. And with the Internet of Things, as my colleagues have been saying here, is you're serving a need. If you can avoid cost by even 1%, which is one of one of their thing is, we can save millions, if not tens of millions of dollars a year by just preventing. So maintenance is a great example. Instead of sending the guy to check the tank or to check the things, The other one is the earliest application of IoT was really in asset management, where when I ship my thing in a truck, where is it? You know, Federal Express uses it with their packages. So it's about efficiency. With efficiency, you save money. When you save money, it's attractive. So
you raised a very important number, okay, when you mentioned that this is leading to a $19 trillion kind of, economic expenditure. And some of the things that we researched over at Sensible City Lab at MIT, it's actually this relationship between how cities are growing and how cities are going to grow. There's a lot of talk about smart cities in the forum in general. What's going to be the role of the IoT and sensors and big data, as well as new economic opportunities that are going to arise from that? Because $19 trillion, and if you scale it up to the full infrastructure, is way larger. How do you see the ecosystem of companies, research, large companies, smart companies, startups, coexisting to actually provide the required solutions that we're going to need for that future?
Okay. The ecosystem is really important because there's no single company that can make it all happen.
Yes.
No, we need people like Intel, Freescale to make those chips with those sensors. Talking about maintenance, how can you deploy those sensors without having to put a maintenance window every year to change the batteries? Mm-hmm. Right. So we need the semiconductor industry to jump in. We need the infrastructure industry to jump in. Talking about complexity, one of the things that we are working is we're partnering with the hardware companies that sometimes they compete with us to have the APIs to join, so we can program the network, so we can abstract the complexity. And then you need the systems integrators, and the business consultants. When we were talking about people, processes, data, things, you need somebody to understand this business process, and then bring the technology companies together, and then bring the analytics, and then twist it up so it fits a particular vertical. And then, of course, you need the entrepreneurs to see new ideas coming, people working on the either wearable devices for the consumer or for business to consumer. So that here the opportunity is huge. And I mean, we're not inventing a new industry. No, we're transforming all the industries, and there are some analysts that are seeing this movement as big as the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, you're talking about Rifkin's The Third Industrial Revolution. But it's important because when you see that concept, there's also a lot of challenges, not just in terms of technology, but in terms of capabilities, right? Earlier we were talking about talent. What's the talent gap? What are the skills that are going to be needed to actually make that happen? What do you think on the way to address these challenges moving forward?
the talent
I mean,
gap?
for some years ago, for Latin America, we made a study, 2007, about the technology skill gap on networking skills. And then we made it again in 2011.
Yeah.
And the gap is growing in Latin America. In Mexico, we are calculating 150,000 jobs that will not be filled because we don't have the engineers with the skills and the English to make it happen. And with the Internet of Everything, people are, the numbers they are thinking about is 2 million engineers will be the gap worldwide for this kind of technology. So pushing out the word that engineering is not that hard, mathematics and physics is not that hard, it's really fun. You get to travel, you get to know beautiful people, you get to live a good life, have a good salary, it's a well-paid career. So those are the kind of things that engineers and scientists, we need to push out, so more people jump into that. There are more venture capital dollars coming to countries like Mexico and Latin America and emerging countries, so more people can make their startups. So definitely the talent, it will be one, if not the biggest challenge to make this transformation happen.
Yeah, I would say from our experience as a startup, there is a big difference between the skills or the expertise you need to make a device that connects to the web compared to a web application. It's still a higher barrier to do that, and that was one of our biggest challenges to actually come up with this prototype that had connectivity to the web at the beginning. And I think this is getting much better. Things like Arduino and open source boards and help from big companies, better chips, more cost-effective solutions for connecting to the web are helping and are making sure, are very good ways to make sure that more startups can get into the IoT and start building prototypes. And I think that's the way it has to be. Like we need to put a lot of support into startups so that they can come up with these ideas and generate new applications.
I think the challenge with those of us in the building block industry, you know, we're working very hard to make these sensing, processing, communicating, these handfuls of technology as easy to use as possible, right? We have other companies we work with. We try to make the building blocks easy. You're going to add these things because what we see is two things. Number one, like you said, we have smaller companies are wanting to get started and they want to create prototypes and they want to do these. If you look at the growth of things like Maker Faire, right?
Yeah.
100,000 people showing up, building all kinds of weird, obscure stuff, right? Well, they're adding, you know, they're pulling all these little building blocks together, and that's where again, the industry through Moore's Law and the reduced cost of we're building all that are coming. And the other part of it though is we see customers or companies that before, you know, maybe they had, you know, maybe one kind of engineering person, and you know, sometimes I use the example of the old thermostat, right? Well, had a little, you know, it had a spring and a mercury switch in it, and that was kind of the thing. And you know, you probably didn't need a whole lot of engineering talent for that. I'm not saying it's the easiest thing, but then all of a sudden now you had an electronic thermostat. Well, he's got a program and he's got little LCDs doing all that. Well, now all of a sudden you're making a thermostat that's connected to your Wi-Fi network. It's got a color display. I want to control it with my phone. So companies that maybe even didn't have really any engineering talent, the next thing you know, they're having to pull in, people are going to work for these companies that weren't necessarily in the market. So that's where, you know, that's where I see it's not just the big companies per se. It's both startups and companies that are now making smart things that have been in the industry a long time and know that they've got to change. And so we're seeing the growth, and of course we want to make their jobs as easy as possible. And what, you know, at any blush is actually pretty complicated technology, but you know, the ecosystem and infrastructure is there.
This segment needs very diverse interdisciplinary talent. So you start anywhere from materials, so this is the building blocks, right, to processes, to design, to architecture, to software, to data scientists.
Yes.
You know, it goes up and on security. So I'm not sure you can say there's a talent gap, but I think the demand shifts as you move down the value chain wherever you are. Systems is a big deal. I think one thing that I would like to also encourage the people in this room is diverse talent is very important, and I think that starts from high schools, that we need to encourage they're teenagers or children to get into math and sciences more, especially females, because that diversity also adds a lot of value into this market.
And this is a very important point because most of the time when we talk about this and we talk about diversity of talent, we often think, you know, in the hard science, we often think in computer science, in mathematics, in physics. There's also another side in you know, terms of design thinking and designers, who are ones that are going to be kind of mixing up, you know, kind of like the possibilities of things we can do around it to, you know, ultimately have all the manifestations of the IoT on our everyday lives. So right around now, we're running a little bit short on time. So what I would like to do is I would like to give the opportunity to the audience to essentially pose you some questions that, you know, so if anybody has a question, please.
Over here.
Thank you. I just was wondering, and regarding the security issue, I don't know what the industry has learned from recent events. we heard last about this bash gap that it's focused on hacking the connected things. And I don't know if the industry has made an agreement to avoid things like hardly it was with the internet, now that the impact will be bigger. I mean, are you focusing on prevent these gaps? What have you learned from what happened to the connected information now that we're working on the connected things and internet of everything, even so?
I mean, we're certainly, you know, security is something that has to go, you know, what we think of as edge to cloud, right? You have to think about security starting from the point that the data is gathered, you know, at every point. And when we look at security, there's a layering from the you know, all the way down to the device level, because as we know, the people that are in the non-security, what would it say? Not criminals, whatever. You know, it seems like they have time on their hands, right, to try to figure out all this stuff. So there's obviously a dynamic that we want to provide those building blocks, and there's certain things all the way down to the basic level that we put in that are going to allow this chain to occur, and, you know, software and hardware that goes. You know, I think the challenge of the industry is obviously making sure people are making, I'll say, the right trade-offs. You know, there's always a trade-off of time to market and other, you know, the building blocks are there. It's making sure that the people that are putting, you know, the companies are putting these together are considering all of these security aspects. Because what I see is, and I have a lot of confidence, I think the industry will solve a lot of the basic, again, the chain of command, the chain of security that goes on from the device through the software, through the wires. It's just making sure that the companies that are building the blocks are taking advantage of those. You know, from Cisco's standpoint as well.
Yes, actually the industry has got together and they have talked to the governments about some of these events and how this is hurting the industry. And we've been taking several steps. One of those is working on an intercloud. It's a cloud of clouds where you can put the data where you want it to be, so the data sovereignty. So, for example, this week we announced a partnership with Deutsche Telekom in Germany, and they are going to be partners with us on the intercloud in Europe to comply with the new government rules about the data of those countries. So this is one side. The other side is when we move to the application-centric infrastructure, we are moving the paradigm of blacklist security, where you basically have a firewall or some other security device where you say what cannot happen. And then we move that paradigm to a whitelist paradigm, where you abstract the network, you put a black box, and then you put different policies across the infrastructure, so the security is all over the infrastructure, not in one particular device. Those are some of the things that we are doing, but I will tell you one more thing, that it's also on the user side. Every year I take a look to the list of the worst passwords of the year, and it's funny how most of us are using the same predictable passwords, leaving our passwords for years without changing them, using 123 or I'm God password. So we have to work on both sides. We as technology companies have to develop better security, more predictive, more proactive, but then once again the education to the public has to be strong, so you know basic security. And I will challenge everybody in this room to go to their smartphones today and check your privacy privacy settings, and maybe you will be amazed of how much you're sharing that you were not aware of. So it's also a matter of both sides working on it.
Hi, so we are the largest heavy machinery distributor. So Caterpillar, for example, we've done business with Freescale in terms of sensors and Internet of Things, and the way we participate in the Internet of Things is obviously machine monitoring. So the two big things are malfunction prevention and making machines more productive. And one of the things we've encountered in this area, you've talked a little bit about this in terms of connectivity, is a lot of machines are working in mines or working in remote construction sites where cellular networks are not an option. And obviously cellular is growing, it's becoming, coverage is becoming wider, and it's becoming faster, but sometimes we have to rely on satellite. And some of the data packages that I've seen recently are $30 a month for 12 kilobytes of data, which is just ridiculous. You can't transfer a lot of stuff there. So where do you see this heading, and how do you see connectivity growing so that the Internet of Things can be enabled where you don't have access to traditional data transfer?
Yeah, that's certainly, I've got a slide that's almost designed to look complicated that maps out data transmission, power rates versus speed, and the wireless standards that exist. And you're right, there's certainly where the cell networks exist, when we think about agriculture and farming and these kind of spaces. Beyond that, what technologies, I don't know that I'm sure I'm going to look to my esteemed colleague from Intel to answer maybe this question, but the connectivity of these things, the complexity of the wireless networks, not to go into too detail, that actually is a huge issue that I know we kind of glossed over here. Down into mines and things, well, I don't know, that's a really good question.
Actually, there is technology for those type of underground and use bigger shortwave type antennas. So the technology exists, but you have to customize it for your application, and then eventually when it comes closer to surface, you can grab a signal from a cellular tower, or from Wi-Fi you can hop to. So it's a multi-protocol, but the technology does exist.
I'm familiar with the mining connectivity systems. It's more just sending the data from the ground to space. If you don't have cell towers around, so are satellites becoming better? Will they be able to transfer much larger amounts of data at a lower cost, or is that not something you predict?
Now, one of the things we've been working some years ago was to create a network of satellites, basically to create a network in space, so you don't have to avoid all the jumps you have to do with traditional satellite technologies. Unfortunately, the economic slowdown came to everybody, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have. How we bring this technology on this access to everybody and everywhere, so we can the digital divide gap is going down. So now I think there are some things that are happening. One, the governments are more aware today than ever that the internet connectivity is a basic utility for the citizens. So that may bring some solutions. There are many networks being done to reach more people. And there are companies coming with innovative things that I don't know if they are going to work or not, but there are some people playing with drones, just catching the information every now and then. There are some companies even working with weather balloons, with the wind currents, trying to bring some connectivity. So I think there are many efforts around. We definitely have to still work, so we bring this bridge down and the cost down.
Yeah, I don't think there's a technology stopper because of the 12 kilobits per whatever you're paying, So I think that's just a business model.
I would say also, from the point of view of what we're doing, we face similar challenges. We have remote tanks that we need to monitor, and you cannot, even Wi-Fi, you can always rely on a customer Wi-Fi because they don't want it to be intrusive, or it's not a reliable means of communicating, so you need to use cellular networks, and that's expensive. So I think there are also people that are proposing changing some of the architecture so that it becomes easier for the end devices to connect to the internet, perhaps by doing propagator devices that can receive data from multiple sensors using very simple protocols, and those propagator devices are just connected to the internet. So we might see some of that coming as a way to make it easier to connect devices to the web.
We have time for one final question. So.
Hello, my name is Josué. I just have a question. What tools are used for data processing with emphasis on business analytics? I have understood that you can use artificial neural networks, but what tools are used for data processing?
So I think that depends a lot on the application.
Yes.
If you are building a very predictive engine where you want to perhaps do forecasting or do classification, then you will use, there are different machine learning algorithms that you can use to do stuff like that. And then you're doing something more like prescriptive, then what ends up happening is you have a lot of big optimization problems. You have, if you want to, say, optimize the routes for delivering gas to a set of trucks, to a set of tanks based on the current readings from a sensor, then you have these big challenging problems that require sometimes to develop custom heuristics or simulation experiments. So it is, I would say it's very dependent on the specific application.
Well, thank you very much, Vida, Stephen, Fernando, Max. I think it's been a very fruitful and interesting discussion, and hopefully it was interesting for you as well. Thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.